Alright, Matt, welcome to episode 42 of the Performance Advantage podcast. We're talking alcohol in sport with the world-renowned expert, Dr. Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes just happened to be Matt Miller's next door neighbour in his office and was my PhD supervisor, so it was great to have a sit-down chat in person with him. We also have a quick update from Matt and myself as to what we've been up to, and we have our giveaway. In terms of the giveaway, we said if you left a review for our podcast, preferably a positive review, we would pick one of those reviewers and give them a training plan for free.
Yeah, they could be a negative review actually as well, but we don't really want that.
So, turns out, despite being 2020, it's awfully hard to, one, leave a review, and two, actually see who's left a review. So, we're giving you an extra week. And this time, all you have to do, help us get the podcast out there, share it on your Instagram story and tag at MTB_PhD and at Dr. Will O'Connor, Dr. Will O'Connor, all one word.
So we're giving you some extra time. And it's much easier to share a podcast via Spotify onto your Instagram story. And our sphere, they're pretty much all on Instagram. So you just go into Spotify, click share, put it on your story, tag us. And we're still giving away a training plan, especially for the start of the year. So all you have to do is share the podcast.
Yeah, I just made a 6-month ultra marathon training plan with downloadable workouts that get sent straight to your Garmin, valued at $250. So you could be getting that one. Alright, Matt, just quickly, what have you been up to?
I was at your house, but you weren't there. So I was watching your house, and I was mountain biking in Rotorua, and it was amazing. So all weekend, I tried to stay away from work, air quotes, and I only opened my laptop a few times just to download a bit of data that I'd recorded on the brake power meter. Other than that, it was fully chill mode, and it was awesome.
I did manage to, one, not get drunk, although I felt like I probably could after listening to Matt. Anyway, also did my last long run. So now I'm like, a bit edgy. Now I'm just tapering. Tapering is something else. But yeah. I put so my new YouTube channel is up and running, getting some good support. So I put up my 60K vlog. I checked in pretty much like every 10 kilometers to say, how it's all going and how what sort of sections, like what my goals were within those sections. Gave some cool footage of the course because I was on the Tarawera course. So any of you that are running that, haven't checked it out, check out that video. It's pretty sweet if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I was actually watching your YouTube video in your house. It was like you were there, but you weren't there.
Did you see how I put Matt above Miller Road?
I guess I didn't watch that closely, but I'll have to go back and check it out.
Yeah, so any of you listeners, maybe about after the first minute or so, don't worry. Don't worry about it. Don't even worry about it. All right, Matt, let's get on with this interview because it is a stellar. Can you just give us a quick rundown on who Dr. Matt Barnes is?
So Dr. Matt Barnes is a world-renowned expert in alcohol and sport. So back in the day, no one really understood what was going on when you were drinking alcohol. People thought actually maybe it helped you in sport. And what he did is he came in, he's like, okay, we need to look at this again and see how it actually mixes in with how we treat alcohol and how is that affecting your recovery if you have to exercise the next day, play a match the next day, things like that. So he was really interested in rugby and he looked at all the biochemical markers, all the performance attributes before and after drinking alcohol. So mostly the next day kind of thing. So we absorbed a lot of information about alcohol just by being around him. And he also absorbed some information about, kind of the things that we were doing. Because he mentioned mountain biking when we were talking about eccentric contractions, which some people don't even believe exists in mountain biking. So it was cool for us to be able to absorb that information. And I still learned a lot, actually, while he was talking. And I think it's really applicable to anyone in any sport. And you might learn a thing or two and maybe chill out a little bit more.
Yeah, I found, some great takeaways from Matt's research, and just one little story about Dr. Matt Barnes. He was a supervisor of mine, and my study was all around low carbohydrate, ketogenic diets. He's a big dude, power lifter, and he goes, oh yeah, well, as part of scientists, we love to experiment on ourselves. So he tried the low carb diet, and being 120 kilos, which is, I don't know, maybe like 300 pounds, he's got to eat quite a bit of calories. So the most extreme low carb lunch I think I saw was when he got a camembert, like a roll, like a circle of camembert, cut it in half, not like through the side. So it acted like two pieces of bread, and then put salami between the two, top and bottom, and then ate that as a sandwich.
Okay, so it's like, I see it. Yeah. So you're using the cheese as a bun.
Yep.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I thought that was like, that's hardcore, man. That is some serious calories. Just, anyone want to try that? Go for it. All right, Matt. Let's put Dr. Matt Barnes on. All right, Matt. So we've got Dr. Matt Barnes here, and we introduced him. So I guess concentrating on alcohol research during his PhD. So does that mean, Matt, you just got drunk the whole time?
Oh, I didn't, but a whole heap of people did. Well, no, not really, but...
It's the only way to get through a PhD, isn't it?
Yeah, I've still got a bottle of vodka in my office, actually, which is probably 10 years old. I don't know if it goes off, but it's still sitting there ready for another study. Yeah.
I think everyone's got a bottle of vodka sitting somewhere, eh?
I've still got a bottle that I brought on the way to the UK in 1999. Brought it back with me.
Good year.
It's just water now. Yeah. No, there was some good nights in the lab for sure. But interestingly, yeah, no one was really that boozed, because we looked at breath alcohol, and most of the guys after my studies, anyway, my control studies, in theory could have driven home. Which is quite concerning when you look at their behaviour in the lab.
I do remember, because I'd arrived here at Massey just after you'd finished all that research. One of the guys, Zach, he was saying there's no way he would have driven home. I think it was Zach or Blake, and he was like, I was definitely over, and they were all under, right?
Yeah, at that time the breath alcohol limit was, I think, 0.8. It's now dropped to 0.5. But that sort of just illustrated how much you could drink and stay within that limit, even though you felt like there's no way I'll drink. And there's been some stuff done in the media. It sort of rolls around the same time of year. People think, well, let's see how much you can drink and drive and all the rest of it. And back in those days when that was that high limit, which was one of the highest in the world, you could drink. These guys, the biggest guy doing the study would have been, say, 110 kilos. So the dose we were using, that would have been 11 standard drinks in an hour and a half.
And he could drive.
And he could have driven when did breath alcohol half an hour after, and according to that, he would have been okay to drive. So and that was the case right across the board. So that dose, had a pretty similar effect on everybody. Yeah. So quite concerning. But when you look at their motor control, often we'd have a PlayStation set up and they'd be playing games in the lab, and you could see their performance deteriorating.
But they got better for a certain amount of time, probably.
Like playing pool.
Yeah. You get like really good, and then it's at a certain point you just aren't good anymore.
Yeah, well, I'd stagger the guys through. So you'd have one guy doing the exercise, and then he'd start drinking, and then you get the other guy on the machine, and they'd start exercising, and then the other guy, and they would have been playing, potentially playing this game. I think it was Tekken or something like that. It's pretty even. And then as one guy started to get a bit more boozed, his performance started to drop off, and the other guy would start, because he was relatively fresh, he would be dominating, and then kind of towards the end of the night, they're both as bad as each other, and, I think the scores were always pretty similar just because of the effects of the alcohol. But you could clearly see the cognitive side of things, which we know is the big effect of alcohol, right? That's why we drink it. The cognitive effect. We don't drink it for any other reason but to make us either feel more confident. I don't know, some people might say they like the taste of alcohol and that's why they drink it. Most New Zealanders tend to drink to get drunk, and they go for that cognitive impairment, I think. There was some good, certainly some good times in the lab.
So we should backtrack by, what was your study? Like, what did you want? Like, why alcohol?
Yep.
Why sports? Like, what was your PhD?
Like, did you just get into sports science to study alcohol? Like, is that, cause you're an expert in alcohol and exercise performance. Like, what was the journey to get there? Why did you want to do that?
Yeah, if we backtrack even further back, I think about my relationship with alcohol. I was a rugby player and I played at a reasonable level. And I certainly indulged in plenty of alcohol as a young man. I managed a student bar in Dunedin. So I saw those sides of alcohol. And then, I studied here at Massey and came through, and Professor Steve Stannard was my supervisor, and I was lab manager here, and I got to know Steve really well. And he organised a conference on sport and alcohol over at the Massey Sport and Rugby Institute. And on the back of that, we kind of realised there's been a lot of research done on looking at how alcohol affects your performance when you've had a few drinks. And that's not very realistic scenario. Not many people that I would know, other than those maybe playing third grade or president grade rugby, where they might have a drink at half time. Nobody else really drinks before performing exercise, right? So the realistic thing is that you do some sort of sport or exercise, and then to celebrate or to make yourself feel better because you've lost or whatever, you have a few drinks, or just to socialise. That's the realistic situation, and that's kind of where we started off. My first study was for my honours, and we thought, well, let's have a look, put some guys through some damaging exercise, so damage a muscle, which is commonly used in our area, hard eccentric exercise to bring about DOMS, which most people will be familiar with if they've done exercise before, and then give them a set amount of alcohol afterwards and track force production through the next 60 hours or so. Which, if we think about, that might represent, say, a game of rugby. You play, the muscle gets damaged, you go to the club rooms and you have a few drinks. Maybe you'll have a few more drinks afterwards. And then the next couple of days are often a write-off, either because you feel too tired or too damaged or fatigued from the rugby, or you've got a hangover,
or maybe
a combination
both, right?
of both, right? Yeah. So that was that thinking. So we set that study up and got 10 guys through, and the dose we used was 1 gram of alcohol per kg of body weight. So, an 80 kilo guy, that's 8 standard drinks. So they did the exercise, gave them a feed after the exercise. So I remember making ham and cheese sandwiches for all my participants and weighing out ham and cheese and all the rest of it. Very technical, very time consuming, and probably a waste of time. But we made sure they weren't drinking on an empty stomach after exercise. Then half an hour after exercise, they started drinking, and they consumed a drink every 15 minutes, or they had 15 minutes to drink each drink over a total of an hour and a half.
And so it was vodka?
It was vodka and orange, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so vodka and orange. Tried to mask the flavour a little bit, but it's pretty hard to hide, because ideally you want to have a blinded treatment, so guys don't know whether they're drinking alcohol or not, and that's almost impossible. And then they'd come back in another time and we'd do damage the other leg and give them the orange juice, so isocaloric, so same energy content, same volume, everything pretty much the same except there's no alcohol. And randomise that and cross it over so it's all nicely balanced.
So those guys always sucked at Tekken then, probably? Guys that had the orange juice? Because no one's good at Tekken, right?
Yeah. There was Tekken, and then I think I watched Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger Commando about 15 times through the course of that study, and possibly the Waterboy, 8 or 9 times as well. So, yeah, got a got a bit thin by the end of it, but that was all right. The guys were entertained. And what that showed was that if you drank after damaging the muscle, the amount of force that you lost was almost twice as much as if you hadn't drunk the alcohol. So, you might have lost, 15%, 20% of the force-producing capabilities of the quadriceps muscle group 30 hours or 24 hours after with the orange juice, but with the alcohol that was, another 15 to up to 20% greater. One guy, he was a really good responder. He lost 40% of the function of his quads. It's a brutal form of exercise. You've got guys falling over in supermarkets or falling downstairs because they can't produce the force to stop the limb kind of giving way.
So for any, like our listeners, I guess, like a lot of them would be runners and ultra runners.
Yep.
So you imagine running, I don't even know, as hard as you can downhill for an hour.
That's exactly it. It's running downhill. So eccentric contractions when the muscles are used as a brake, and running downhill is a really good example. The worst muscle damage I ever had was running down the far side of the Tongariro crossing, and I'm not a runner. And I got separated from my group, and I thought, well, it's going to be easy. I'll just run down. I don't know how long that took, but I probably couldn't walk for a week after that. My quads are absolutely smashed.
Yeah, well, to paint a picture, how tall are you? 195?
Yeah.
About 120 kgs? Yeah, so putting that down a hill.
Well, you probably hurt the ground, actually, too.
Yeah. It was good on the way down, but the next day I was like, oh my goodness, and then the day after, and that was with alcohol, so who knows? I might still be recovering now if I'd had a few drinks afterwards. So that was the initial study. It showed us that the interaction between post-exercise alcohol consumption and muscle damage has an effect on your ability to recover, because the amount of force that was decreased, even though the rate of recovery was pretty much the same. The fact that you're starting at a lower point means that it's taking you longer to come back up to that baseline level. So you're probably, when the muscle was really badly damaged, you're probably reducing the time to recovery or increasing the time to recovery, by maybe a day or two. Yeah, it's going to take you a couple more days to recover.
Yeah, because that was one of the big ones the big sort of findings that I remember.
Yep.
It's like, wow, because at that point, I'd definitely get pissed after most of my races.
Well, it's a super real situation. Like, if I think of all the mountain bikers, that's like the first thing that you do. Like, you finish your ride and then you hit the beers. You're probably not hitting 6 of them because you're driving home, but most mountain bikers are putting alcohol into themselves at some point after the ride.
I think that might be all right, for mountain bikers, because what I've shown across a number of studies, because we did that study and then we redid it again to make sure, because finding one off is just something that might happen, but you need, and I don't think this happens enough in science, you need to repeat the study to see if it actually happens repeatedly to say that alcohol has an effect on your recovery, right? One off, we could glorify that, and we could go out and we went out into the press and all the rest of it, and they had lots of fun with that. But one study doesn't mean it's going to happen all the time. So we showed it over the course of 3 studies repeatedly that if the muscle's damaged through strenuous, unaccustomed eccentric exercise, then alcohol is going to have an effect. Now, mountain biking, like most cycling, is going to have, mountain biking might have more of an eccentric component, I suppose, because you're up off the saddle and you're absorbing the vibrations and things. So unlike road cycling,
I'm quite a mountain bike expert.
But the level of damage is not going to be the same as 300 eccentric contractions or even a heavy squat session. So I think the findings are very, very specific to a damaged muscle. And I think your concentric-based sports, cycling, swimming, probably we can't apply that. And everybody wants to apply that knowledge and say, alcohol's always going to be bad for you after exercise. Well, no, it probably isn't going to be, right? And it's going to depend on the state of the muscle. And if it's injured, and that's always been a recommendation, if a muscle's injured, you don't drink alcohol, right? Because it can increase bleeding. And although that's only been shown in sheep, there's no proof of that in humans yet. Right?
So, but That obviously leads, that there's a very obvious next question to that. And people are thinking, well, that must mean that if I have alcohol after my ride, that it's good for me.
Well,
Because you see that kind of thing, right?
Yep,
Like you see in them, like, have a glass of wine every night and that's going to be good for you. It's not because of the alcohol per se, it's because of the antioxidants or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But,
I mean, the thought that alcohol is good for you is quite ridiculous. Okay. and I started by saying I used to dabble in a fair bit of alcohol consumption. I don't have anything, against alcohol, and people will drink how they want to drink, and I'm not, going to say nobody should be drinking alcohol. But to think that it's good for you in any possible way is kind of ridiculous now. There's so much evidence to show that there's a big study done, I think it was published last year or the year before, this big meta-analysis that they looked at alcohol harm across the globe. Massive study. And they showed that even one drink on a regular basis can shorten your lifespan. And it will increase your risk of, alcohol consumption's linked to 200 different illnesses and diseases. And now they're saying that even one drink on a regular basis can increase your risk of getting things like cancer, cardiovascular disease, a whole heap of different things. So, and red wine, you're talking about red wine, and there's perhaps things in red wine that are good for you. That's really only been shown in females, right? This cardioprotective kind of thing, where it might be good for heart health. That's all good, but we know that even a small amount of alcohol increases a female's chance of breast cancer. So it's kind of, do you want to protect your heart from cardiovascular disease, or do you want to get breast cancer? It's kind of, to me, the risk is quite great. So yeah, there is no benefit to drinking alcohol at any stage.
it is like a poison. Because what
a toxic.
is alcohol? Like,
alcohol's, it's a toxin. It's the fourth, behind carbohydrate, protein, and fat. It's termed the fourth macronutrient because it does deliver energy to us. So it's 7 calories per gram, right? So per gram of alcohol. So a standard drink in New Zealand and in most countries is 10 grams of alcohol. So that's a 330 ml can of beer or a stubby of beer, a standard glass of wine, and most people would pour far too much into their glass of wine. So that's not necessarily a standard, or a shot glass of 30 mils of a standard spirit. That's going to be 10 grams of alcohol. So that's a standard drink. So it's giving us energy. The body, when we drink it, metabolizes alcohol first because it's toxic. It gets it out of the system at the expense of metabolizing carbohydrate or fat. So if you're sitting down and having a glass of wine or a shot glass or whatever with a meal, then that's going to be,
Who's having a shot glass with a meal?
You don't? Tequila with your tacos?
gross.
Yeah, probably bad example.
So anyway, I'm having a few shots.
You're having a few shots with your Sunday roast with your grandma. That alcohol is going to be preferentially metabolized. It gets broken down in the liver, preferentially, as I say. And then what happens is, the byproducts of that metabolic process enter the bloodstream, and they get shuttled around the body, and other tissues take it up, and they're going to use that sort of metabolic byproduct, again, preferentially. So, if that's present and available in, say, muscle tissue, you're not going to burn fat as energy, or you're not going to burn carbohydrate because of this other stuff that's there, which means there's a potential that you don't use fat, right? So if we drink a lot of, and they say, alcohol can make you fat. Well, that's slightly true, potentially, because it does provide substrate for other tissues to produce energy. It's going to get broken down via the TCA cycle and whatnot, like fat does, and carbohydrate does, but at the expense of other macronutrients. So then we use that, and we're not using energy from other sources. And if we're eating lots of food and drinking lots of alcohol, then we're probably going to end in an energy surplus, and that'll be stored. So, that's kind of alcohol. In terms of its metabolism, we metabolize about 6 to 7 grams of alcohol an hour, so not quite a standard drink every hour. So if you wanted to maintain a low or a zero breath alcohol level, you drink very, very slowly over a period of time. It's just that we don't drink like that. We drink fast. You can drink, I don't know. The stubby seems very small to me. It's 2 mouthfuls kind of thing, probably.
Is that what's that? What's a stubby?
That's
your standard can.
It's 330 mils. That's not a lot.
Like your can of Coke.
Yeah.
What is it? 8 ounces, is it?
12? Okay. I forget.
Yeah, 12
It's been a while.
It's 12 ounce. Yeah. So the standard drink's like in the bar, you'll go and you'll buy a 12 ounce beer. That's a standard drink. It's 12 ounce. So that's pretty easy to drink.
In an hour.
Yeah, you wouldn't drink it in an hour, right?
Yeah.
So, so you're going to drink more than 1 drink in an hour. So then the rate that you're absorbing alcohol is greater than the rate that you can clear it, and it's going to accumulate in your bloodstream. And because alcohol is, we're talking about ethanol, which is the alcohol that we drink. There's lots of other different types of alcohol. Because it's water soluble, it can go into any tissue in the body. It won't go into fat, but it'll go into muscle. It'll go into the brain. Those would be the 2 main tissues, brain and muscle tissue. And it has effects on the function of all of that tissue, basically, particularly the brain. The liver of everybody pretty much metabolizes alcohol at the same rate. Whether you're male or female, you're going to clear alcohol at the same rate. Now, females don't handle alcohol to the same extent as males because they're smaller, they have less muscle mass, so they end up with a more concentrated amount of alcohol in their body. Right? And it would be the same with me and you. What do you weigh, if you don't mind me asking, Matt?
About 60.
So you're 6. So you're half my weight at the moment. So
does that make you feel less?
I do need to lose a couple of kilos. I'm trying.
Well, you're also twice my height, so it makes sense.
You're 3'4". If we were to sit down here and go 1 for 1 with shots, and come back to shots, irrespective of our drinking background, in theory, I should be able to handle more alcohol, right? Because I've got more muscle tissue, and possibly more brain tissue.
Doesn't mean it all does anything, but yeah.
That's right. So it's quite redundant. To dilute that, because all that tissue is full of water, so you're diluting the alcohol. Females and small people with less muscle.
Females and small people.
Insignificant people.
Female and Matt.
There's a bunch of small people out there, right? They are not going to be able to handle alcohol the same way because it's going to be more concentrated in the tissues of the body.
I mean, there's a silver lining to this.
It's a cheap night out.
Yeah, I'm a cheaper date.
That's actually, I didn't know that was the reason. Like, I figured those people just metabolized it faster, but now that makes sense.
Yeah,
everyone metabolizes it. There or thereabouts the same. Obviously,
yeah, pretty much the same.
But then you just have a larger sponge. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. The liver's pretty similar size in most people. There'll be some variations, but they've done studies where they've looked at clearance rates of ethanol in males and females, and it's pretty much the same when it's standardized for body characteristics. So it does come down to the amount of muscle mass you've got. Or, for that matter, you can get some people that are really big and carrying a whole heap of fat. They might be 40% body fat, small amount of muscle mass. They're going to be quite susceptible to, they're a cheap date as well. Yeah, so.
For alcohol, like, obviously.
Yeah. Well, go to Burger King, drink a lot,
Well, that's the thing, alcohol, while it can affect your metabolism, it also affects your food choices if you drink a lot of alcohol. You start to overeat. You don't understand. It actually increases your appetite as well. So you end up overeating when you're intoxicated potentially. So it's disrupting metabolism, making you do bad things around your diet, and that can lead to an increase in weight.
It's been known to make vegans non-vegan for the night as well.
Yeah,
I've seen that happen.
So it's kind of a bear goggles for food, I suppose,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're looking at a burger and you think it's a carrot. I don't know.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, coming back to that, alcohol, it is a toxin. It does need to be cleared straight away. And it is, the other thing to remember is it's contributing energy. So if we're thinking about our diet and you guys will be talking to people about their diets and telling them, you have to consider the energy you're getting from alcohol on top. It's a discretionary energy source. So if we think about when you look at your macronutrient requirements over a day or over a week or whatever, you're going to plan mainly around your carbohydrate. Probably your carbohydrate might be the thing that you manipulate most, but your protein and your fat might be, depending on your type of diet, are going to be pretty stable, right? And you're focusing on where am I getting my energy from. Once you've met your energy requirements through your carbohydrates, your proteins and your fats, then your discretionary kind of energy can come from your crappy kind of food or your alcohols, just to top you up. It doesn't, you've got your macronutrient requirements sort of ticked. That's where alcohol sits in a diet. We'd never program someone's diet to include alcohol. You wouldn't say, right, this week or today you have to eat 400 grams of carbohydrate and get 100 grams of protein and some fat. But it's really essential that you get 200 grams of alcohol in your diet.
It's like a vegetable.
You're never going to say that. Yeah.
Like pizza, right? It's in the same category as pizza.
It is in the same category as fast food and pizza and some of those poorer choices, because it's not essential. Even though it's a macronutrient, the body does not need it for anything at all, unlike the other three. We need carbohydrate, even in small amounts for brain function. We need fat and we need protein. We do not need alcohol.
Yeah.
There's no need for it.
But it's still like so it's a toxin.
Yep.
It's bad for us. It's not a super good energy source.
Yep.
But we still drink it.
Yep.
Because of the effects that it's having on our brains. So it's a social thing.
Yep.
For some reason, we've accepted it over thousands of years or however long it's been around because of what it's doing to our brain. So what's kind of happening at that level?
Yeah, at the brain, it's potentially having effects on neurotransmitters, disrupting the way the signals are translated through the brain. It's actually it's depressive. It has a depressing effect on us. It may not feel like that when you're on the dance floor and you've had a couple of jugs. You don't necessarily feel depressed, but it's the
next day.
It's not a stimulant. It depresses brain function and the way we feel. So quite different to some of the other things that we take that will boost, caffeine and things like that will actually make us feel a bit more invigorated. It affects those neurotransmitters in a dose dependent manner. So a small amount can have a positive effect on mood. For example, you feel a bit better about yourself and about your environment. And you feel more comfortable talking to people.
There's an inhibition,
it's a social
inhibitory.
Yeah.
But as opposed to it might feel like a stimulation effect, but it's really just removing what was. Yeah.
So at a low dose, I guess we could think of it as being beneficial. But then as we start to drink more and more, we start to see those effects that we're probably familiar with when we're drunk. A loss of coordination would be the biggest thing, and that's why we can't drive when we're intoxicated, because we simply don't respond. So our response time and our coordination decreases. So your response to any sort of stimulus is affected as well. And then up to it, when we start to look at really high doses, we're going to lose consciousness and we could die. Right? So you could die of alcohol poisoning. Brain's going to shut down. You've poisoned the brain, and that's it. And there's always, stories of kids at university and orientation week that have gone. And I remember it when I was living in Dunedin, gone back to their halls of residence after a big night, and their mates have gone to get them, and they've died, of alcohol poisoning. And that's going to take a lot of alcohol, but it's not, given the way society drinks. We're not far away from that often when we go out drinking, probably.
Yeah.
There's big doses, but in reality, that's how people drink. They drink big doses. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really just surprising that, like, how toxic it actually is and how it causes problems, actually. This is a totally separate issue, but it's, like, it just really blows my mind how it's accepted around the world, pretty much.
Yep.
That we purposely put this into our bodies to an extent that it can really cause harm.
Yeah, you can look at the harm that it does society and individuals, and the cost on the healthcare system in any certainly westernized countries, but just about any country. You would wonder why governments don't regulate more tightly around alcohol. You know, we're trying to stop people from smoking. We've been pretty harsh on party pills. 5 years ago, party pills were probably maybe longer than that, outlawed very, very quickly after one person died on the West Coast, because he had party pills with alcohol. Suddenly completely banned, and party pills, they're made of sheep dip and all sorts of stuff, so you don't want to be taking those. But how many people die of alcohol-related issues, in New Zealand every year? It's a massive number. As I said at the start, it contributes to 200 different diseases, and this is just drinking small amounts. It's a bit worrying, really.
One of the big, interesting things around alcohol, I remember Sarah, who was doing the research on, the Heineken Open and the sevens. So in New Zealand, rugby sevens is this huge, pretty much piss up. I think
wait. For our American listeners, that means you're getting drunk, right?
yeah.
Piss up,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I guess it'll be like tailgating it at the NFL kind of thing. And I can't remember if you remember this stat. I remember it as around 8 or 10 seconds. Every 8 or 10 seconds, you saw the Heineken advert. You saw it. So it was on the field, painted on the field. It's on the jerseys. When they scanned the crowd, everyone had a cup of Heineken. It was on the billboards. It was the title sponsor. So when the ad came up, it was so you pretty much could not, you were every single shot of that whole tournament across the weekend, sort of 8 a.m. till, 9 p.m. you did not see people drinking in the Heineken logo. Right.
Yeah, I do remember that, and certainly alcohol and sport go back a long way.
It was like cigarettes in sport.
Yeah, it used to be the Winfield Cup was the NRL competition, right? And Rothmans sponsored the one-day cricket in New Zealand, and there was
and all the motor racing was all the Marlboro.
Yep, it'll be the same in the States. Yeah, absolutely. And that was outlawed, and there's been a strong push to not outlawed but regulated against. Been a strong push to eliminate alcohol sponsorship in New Zealand, and in other countries have already picked up on that. I think France, for example, did away with that a few years ago and just replaced it with telecommunications. There's lots of big corporations out there, but we're still sort of hanging on to that. But my question around that has always been, just because you see a logo, does that make you drink more? That link hasn't been proven. Yes, you're seeing something all the time. I see Coke ads on TV all the time. It doesn't make me drink more Coke.
Yeah, true.
So I'm just,
I haven't bought a brand new Ford.
Don't tell the marketing managers, right? Because they think they're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I would, there's a study I'd like to do is just to look and see whether that does. The more you show someone some form of advertising, particularly in an acute environment, like the Sevens or American football, any kind of game where you go and you sit and they've got advertising flashing up, does that mean you're going to go and get a beer more often than not?
Yeah, I see. It's probably you're just more likely when you are to get a beer to get their brand.
Yeah. Not to drink more.
Yeah.
So that would be my question. Does it increase someone's?
Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that.
I never see a Burger King ad. I'm still, if I'm driving past this one Burger King, I stop at I'm going in. There's no question. And I've never seen a Burger King ad.
It's just promoting brand preference.
Yeah, that's it.
The classic.
Well, they're just targeting their demographic, aren't they?
Yeah.
Their audience is people who support sport.
Yeah.
Sport watchers love a beer. So you're I need to get in front of them.
We look at the Otago rugby team has always had that association with Speight's.
Yeah.
So, and being a Southern man was being associated with Speight's. So, if you can build that brand identity and hook people in that they want to be a Southern man and they want to support Otago rugby, I better drink this product.
Yeah, like Bud Light and stuff.
Doesn't
like
just
that
because you
as
drink
well.
something doesn't make you a Southern man or mean that you're a worse or a better supporter. It's just trickery, which is what marketing is. I guess, you know.
This is a really good time for us to cut to an ad break from our sponsors, right?
Might have been this week.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, coming back to what you're talking about is, I don't understand why we don't do more to regulate. And I think one of the big mistakes, when I was in the pub industry, I got out in 1999, and the following year, yep, that was right. They changed the drinking age back down to 18. So
was it 21 before that, or?
It was 20.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty sure, yeah, 20. So, with the flip of a switch, or you go on from midnight on one night to the next day, you've been kicking kids out of a pub and suddenly you've got to let them in. And they haven't matured overnight. Their ability to control themselves hasn't changed. And I think we could, in terms of the society, New Zealand society anyway, it's probably different in other countries. If we increase the drinking age again, and we made it more expensive to buy alcohol in supermarkets and cheaper to buy in pubs, we'd see quite a shift in probably the harm that alcohol does to a certain extent. Drinking in a supervised environment's far better for you than drinking cheap alcohol in a flat or park or whatever.
Fuck.
Or a tree, for example.
No, I've done that.
Yeah. Right. So there's and I'm sure there's people lobbying for all this sort of stuff, but the government makes so much money out of tax on alcohol that I don't expect them to do much about it anytime soon.
Yeah.
But then for sport,
Yeah.
recovery.
So you were talking before we went on the air, where you were talking about the history of alcohol.
Yep.
Like actually using it in sport as an ergogenic aid. Right?
Yeah, and
So
that's
something
what I
that
say,
helps
sport and alcohol have a very long history. If we think back, Greco-Roman times, the ancient Greeks, they're drinking alcohol as a way of preparing themselves for athletic endeavour, I suppose. And oftentimes back in, if we think way back in those times, probably alcoholic beverages were a safe way of getting your fluids. Sometimes the water would be pretty horrible.
Yeah, I remember reading that
a
it
lot
was like
of impurities.
they were drinking alcohol over water because they had no idea.
Yeah.
People were just dying because of whatever bacteria was growing in the water.
So, beer's been fermented, alcohol's been fermented, and it's been purified, really. So it's a safer way of getting your fluids. Even children would drink watered down wine. So often they would water their wine down and then drink that like we might drink juice or something like that.
Sounds like a real handy excuse for someone that wants to drink alcohol. You could just boil your water.
Yeah,
That's a good way to do it too.
That's right. Those simple times. So they were drinking, almost treating alcohol like an ergogenic aid, I suppose. Drinking it prior to athletic events, whether that was wrestling or javelin or any of those, and same in the Chinese civilization, which is equally, if not older. There's reports of athletes and soldiers preparing for battle and preparing for competition by consuming reasonable amounts of alcohol. And that's kind of continued on all the way through from those early times through the early Olympics. And then if we look at the modern Olympics, the turn of into the 1900s, late 19th century, athletes are drinking alcohol during events like the marathon or the Tour de France as a way of staying hydrated, but also with the view that it's going to improve their performance. Because I guess the thought is that it makes you more aggressive, and if you're more aggressive, then you potentially go in it, and it decreases any inhibition that you have. So you're more confident, you're more aggressive, and therefore you're probably going to perform better. And that was the belief probably right through even the 1980s into the 90s. When you look at the research that was done, all of the research before the stuff that we did was around alcohol being consumed and then you're exercising. So it was, drink X amount of alcohol, jump on the treadmill, and we'll do a time trial, or we'll see how it affects. So, a couple of studies, they often looked at different doses. They give you a dose of alcohol, small and increase up, and they might look at your 100 meter performance, maybe a 400, an 800, and maybe a 1K, and what that showed was the more you drank, the worse your performance. Surprise, surprise. And the longer distances were affected more than the shorter distances. So your sort of anaerobic type exercise, maybe your 100s, 200s, sprint type performance, not really affected by even high doses of alcohol. But your long distance, more long distance stuff, whether you guys call 1K long distance, so it's an awful long way for me to walk. At least it feels like that. That kind of thing, so that longer distance, probably that aerobic type stuff was being affected. And they looked at heart function and heart rate and stroke volume and a whole heap of stuff. And, alcohol can put a bit of cardiovascular strain, a bit more strain on the heart, but, often the effects of alcohol on the heart are being made up for by, an increased contractility of the left ventricle. So it sort of makes up for anything else that's going on. So you don't necessarily see a change in heart rate or cardiac output, for example, when you drink alcohol, because the heart kind of adapts to take care of that. And it probably wasn't having an effect on these guys doing their runs. Probably the biggest effect is on your motor control and your ability to coordinate your movements. Things like running economy are going to decrease with higher doses of alcohol, simply because you're less coordinated. You're probably spending more time on the ground, and maybe you're taking more steps. So there's more force, there's more energy required, and you need to use more oxygen. So that's probably the effect there. So there's a negative dose response on aerobic performance. They did one study where they had guys on a treadmill and they gave them drink before. I can't remember the dose. It was a reasonable amount. It might have been a couple of drinks before. Partway through, they gave them a couple more drinks, and they looked at how long they could run. And I think of the, let's say, 8 or 10 people doing that, only 4 of them finished. The others were sort of vomiting and couldn't finish. So there's some detriment there. Strength side of things, even really high doses of alcohol don't affect your ability to produce maximal forces. Again, it comes down possibly to that anaerobic side of things, and we're not disrupting the way we get energy.
You might lose your balance if you're doing a nasty squat, though.
Yeah, you're not going to you shouldn't do resistance exercise when you're intoxicated.
Yeah.
You're not going to go and do CrossFit when you've had a couple of drinks, or, do some Olympic lifting when
No one's going to, CrossFit's not going to drink alcohol.
No, they're like fully keto.
Yeah, straight edge.
Yeah.
There is keto alcohol. Yeah. Yes.
Well, actually, because it's, I can't remember.
So called.
Where,
So called.
where I was reading, when I was reading this, but when I was doing my ketone research, because they tried to use alcohol as an alternate form of energy as well.
Right.
Because of the preferential, it's the same, because ketones are essentially an alcohol.
Yep.
Like metabolized the same way. Metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase.
Sure.
As
Yep.
well in the liver.
Yep.
Because you have that, I guess, free 7 calories,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be preferentially
Yep.
metabolized.
Yep.
I remember looking at that, and it was the same thing where, same as like my keto stuff, where the body kind of just compensates.
Yep.
And it was maybe less, shut down that fat metabolism.
Yep.
More so. I don't know if you saw any of that.
No, I haven't seen that comparison. But yeah, it makes
Not between the ketone, but like, have you
the
seen
alcohol.
that when they did that, they tried to use alcohol as an alternate?
No, I didn't.
energy source?
Yeah, I didn't see that one. But that makes sense. But you've got the effects on your brain, obviously, and
Yeah.
so, how much alcohol do you need to drink to get enough energy to sustain a long distance run, or even just a ketogenic lifestyle? You're not going to. Yeah, it doesn't. It's functionally, it's not going to work, really, is it? Yeah. So
I remember going to all these, like in mountain biking, there's these single speeders, right? They just have one gear on their bike, and when they go to events such as the Single Speed World Championships, which you basically dress up in a costume and ride through big mud puddles and stop at beer stops, right? So there's a mandatory beer stop, and you have to like chug a beer and...
No, I thought it was only if you wanted to take the shortcut.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can take the long cut, which then you eat like a dry Wheat Bix or something like that.
Right, yeah,
and that's obviously going to slow you down. So you take the shortcut and drink a beer.
Right, yeah.
And you end up drinking quite a lot of beers through that.
Yeah. Okay, I hadn't heard of that one. I'm certainly aware of the Beer Mile. Heard of the Beer Mile? So,
yeah, we've got the New Zealand Off-Road Beer Mile Champs coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So you'll be there?
Hopefully, I need to check the date.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's usually done on a 400-metre track, and you do...
That's like hotly competitive, the actual...
Oh, it's massive.
Yeah,
you go onto the beermile.com website, and there's hundreds of thousands of competitions and people that have registered for it. So you go on and you log the type of drink that you've consumed, and your time for the mile. So that's, you drink a beer every 400 metres. There's regulations around what sort of beer, but you have to write that down. You can do milk or you can do other drinks, but that again, that's a study that I'd like to do as well, just to see. I looked into that a little bit about what that might have, whether that'll have an effect on you, and probably doesn't, other than having,
volume, I think.
Volume sloshing around in your gut.
Like carbonated volume.
Yeah. That would be the biggest issue. So discomfort.
I mean, you'd probably...
rather than the effects of alcohol.
You'd slow down by drinking that much water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think
So
it's
these
just...
guys are like the pros, are like professional runners that can handle their beer, that can chug.
Well,
and they're sort of like,
good.
they're like sort of, I can't remember if there's a zone.
Yep.
I think I'd have to look it up. Might be speaking on my ass, but there's a zone at which you're allowed to drink in, and then you have to consume it within that zone, and then you're allowed to run again.
Yeah, it's a bit like a relay, I suppose. You've got to hand the baton on.
Yeah,
before
you can't
get
just
to
like grab the beer and just like run and drink while you.
Yeah, you've got to sort of almost come to a stop, I think.
Yeah.
But the times are pretty good for, I can't remember what they are. They might be, I don't know, what's a good mile time?
Or sub 4 minute mile is like the gold standard.
Yeah, so they're probably 5 minutes or...
No, they're they're faster than what, the guy who's like the top dude, they're faster than what I could run a mile.
Yeah.
Doing it in beer mile. Throwing more like 4:30 or something.
So it probably doesn't...
Crazy. These are like guys who can do like a, say, 350 mile.
They do a 3:49.
And then they're just doing just doing 10 seconds to smack a beer. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
and it wouldn't
better.
matter what they're drinking. The time would be the same, whether it's beer or Coke, or the carbonated factor obviously makes it harder to drink. It's a bit like doing a yard glass.
I'll look it up. You guys can.
But yeah, there's not too many, other than those two examples, there aren't too many times where you would drink during competition. So that was the research up until kind of when we started doing our stuff. There was one study done on muscle damage, and they drank and then they did the exercise. So they drank and then they did the damaging exercise, and there was no effect. So we kind of followed on from that and drank and then did the damage. And so if you look at I guess the American College of Sports Medicine is kind of the number one in terms of recommendations for what you should and shouldn't do around various types of exercise and the benefits of exercise. Their position stand was written, I think, in 1992, and that was all focused on pre-exercise alcohol consumption and how it affects your performance. And their conclusion was there's no benefit to drinking alcohol before exercise. In fact, it may be detrimental. So, and that's fine.
It had to be said, right?
It does, yeah. That's right.
They need to take a stance on it.
Yeah,
like they had to put something down.
Yeah, that's right. And they had to use the available research. But now we've done a lot more research since then. There's still lots more to do, but we did that muscle damage study and that series of studies, and that was all good. And one of them showed that probably there was some sort of, when the muscle was damaged and you drank alcohol, there might be some sort of central effect, so that it might be more painful. So the brain is basically holding the muscle back from performing potentially as a protective mechanism. So we did that study, and then that's all good and well. That's in a lab environment, and the damage is really extreme. Guys falling over in the supermarket and downstairs and stuff's all cool. But it's not
standard research.
It's not realistic. To look at that model, you think, yep. And often in science, we're going to do something really extreme to get that interaction that we want, I suppose, to start with.
Yeah, to see if it's there.
Yeah, and it's there, right? So we know it's there. So now let's put that into a real setting. So with my rugby background and the way rugby players drink and whatnot, a design based on a paper from the UK, designed a rugby game simulation that involved sprints, jogs, walks, tackles, simulated scrums, some agility stuff, and they did that for 80 minutes with a half time. And there's some performance measures in there, and there's performance measures before, and then the next day and the next day. So they did that in pairs, and they tackled each other and stuff. Then they went back into the lab and they drank the same amount as we used in the first few studies. And we looked at speed, and we looked at testosterone and cortisol, and creatine kinase as a measure of muscle damage for the next 72 hours after the game. Right, so you think that's cool. The simulation brought about the same physiological responses as a Six Nations rugby game. So heart rates were averaged about 172 beats per minute across the 80 minutes. Testosterone and cortisol responses were exactly as you would see in that level of rugby. So physiologically, and lactates were the same as you'd expect from a game of rugby like that. So the stress was almost exactly the same as you get from a top-level game of rugby. Then these guys went and got, not drunk, but they went and consumed this alcohol, or they consumed the orange juice again. So we crossed it over. They did that twice. And there was no effect of alcohol on their recovery and their subsequent performance. Which was a bit of a bummer, I suppose. You want to see stuff when you're doing science, but I think they weren't damaged enough. If we think about how damaged people were to start with, these guys, most of them had played rugby that season. They're conditioned to the knocks and the demands of rugby. The creatine kinase levels, the muscle damage wasn't very high. So they probably weren't damaged enough or fatigued enough for the alcohol to interact with. So that kind of made me think, right, if a muscle's not damaged, then probably alcohol's not going to have any effect on it. So that was that. And then the next step from there was, that's all good. So that maybe that simulation wasn't hard enough. Maybe guys needed to be tackling harder or whatever. So I supervised a master's student, and we got two rugby teams played each other. And this was a different approach. So I wasn't going to be able to get ethics to give guys a higher dose. I'd already shown that one gram of alcohol was detrimental to recovery when a muscle was damaged. Hard to go higher. So we took what we termed a naturalistic approach, where the guys went and consumed alcohol by themselves and they reported back. There's some limitations around that, because once you've had a few, you don't necessarily keep track of things all that well. But we had two teams play each other. We did performance measures before the game and the next day and the next day. So we're kind of simulating a Saturday game, a Saturday night of drinking, a Sunday night, and then a Sunday and a Monday of recovery kind of thing. One team went out and drank what they'd normally drink, and the other team came into the lab, and we fed them and we rehydrated them, we entertained them for a bit, we got them to watch movies.
You didn't play Tekken, did you?
We didn't play Tekken, we watched Commando, something like that. And then we sent them home, and they did everything that you would, by the book you would say, this is going to be best for your recovery. Hydration and glycogen resynthesis and sleep. And then we got the two groups back in, and they did all their tests again, and we looked at hydration status, and that was pretty foul. Some of the guys were they were all pretty much chronically dehydrated. But after the game and after a night on the booze, some of the urine samples looked like grainy Fanta. with a thick head of, like a
It looked like beer.
it looked like a spider, he's with the ice cream and Fanta,
Coke,
and you've got a bit of
It's disgusting.
a head on it. So, we looked at mainly anaerobic ability, so repeated sprint ability. So that's 6 by 40 meters going every 30 seconds, which is hard to do when you're not hungover. So we're looking at a hangover, I suppose, at this stage, particularly the next morning. A mid-thigh pull, so a isometric measure of lower body strength. Vertical jump, so a measure of power. We did blood sampling and we did the hydration stuff. We did some cognitive stuff, but that was really messy. But what we found was the guys that went out drinking, and average alcohol consumption for that group was 19 standard drinks for that night.
It's the average.
Was the average. Our questionnaire only went up to 20 standard drinks, right? And so some of the guys told us they drank, 30 on the night.
Well, did you guys pay for this, or?
No.
Wow.
No, we just said, go and do what, and they might have gone a little bit over the top, but they went and they claimed that was a normal sort of standard night on the booze.
For those guys, because it wasn't like the high
They're
level
not,
competitive
they're pretty
rugby team.
relatively social, sort of team, relatively.
I mean, it sounds pretty, like they're there for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah, it's a real life situation though.
Yeah.
It's a standard, it's like,
you would see the same kind of behaviour with senior rugby players.
Yeah.
You would, whether here or in the States. I've talked to guys on podcasts in the States, and they're playing rugby for the social aspect, not because it's rugby and it's a great sport, it's because of the social side. So rugby players all around the world will drink like that, often. So these guys had a massive night on the booze. Up until that night, so we looked at, sleep patterns, just reported, were they sleeping well? The night that they went out, they only had 3 hours of sleep. So sleep deprived, severely hungover, and yet there was no effect on their performance the next day. Right? And there was no change in hydration status either. Right? So they've done everything that you shouldn't do. Their food diaries, one guy, he ate 3 carrots on the Sunday after the night out, and another guy had 5 pies. So, as I was saying before, it changes the way you eat. So, not only they're sleep deprived, they're hungover, their diet has been put all over the place, and yet there's no effect on their recovery the day after and the day after. Right? So, we managed to publish that. There was
recovery or performance?
Recovery, right?
Yeah.
So that was interacting with the demands of a rugby game.
Yeah.
But the problem was that, there was a small effect on their ability to produce lower body power output. So their vertical jump was down a little bit, but not massively.
Yeah.
They're not jumpers, right?
Statistically down, but not a couple of percent probably.
Yeah.
It's not like they couldn't get off the ground anymore. I guess the timing of it, the day after, it's that interaction between the game and the alcohol. So it's kind of a combination of recovery and the effects of a hangover. And then the Monday morning was sort of recovery. So, no effects there. And in theory there was, these guys had just come out of a rugby season. They're familiar with the demands of rugby. They're familiar with drinking. Okay, so when we did the audit, which is the alcohol use disorder identification test, so it's how you tell how much people drink on a regular basis. You can quantify people as a moderate drinker or a hazardous drinker. Most of these guys were classified either as alcoholics or borderline alcoholics.
Okay.
Right? So they had they were very familiar with alcohol, right? And therefore, I think if the 3 of us went and did some sort of physical sport and then drank like that, well, I certainly don't drink like that, we would probably be worse the wear the next day and probably couldn't perform.
So there's a potential that their baseline is relatively inhibited.
Yeah, they're trained. They're trained for alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
Because we get an upregulation of alcohol dehydrogenase.
Yeah.
Right. So the more you drink, the greater this enzyme that's responsible for breaking alcohol down, it gets increased.
It's like training.
It is. It's like training. And that's why alcoholics need to drink more to get the same effect of alcohol, because they're trained. So
you can improve that standard rate that you said, like 7
you
grams an hour.
you can, you can, but with heavy
Training.
training.
Yeah, well, like if you run once a month, you're not going to become like a way better runner.
No, that's right.
Like,
but if you're
you need to
drinking,
commit.
yeah.
Like, are you doing this or not? Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Drink.
If you're drinking most nights of the week, even, I don't know, 3 drinks most nights of the week, you're going to get that upregulation of alcohol dehydrogenase. And it's going to take more alcohol for you to feel that good feeling that you want from the alcohol. And then it's having an effect on the centers of the brain that are responsible for addiction as well. So you're drinking more, and that's having that effect on that addictive side of things, and you get hooked, and you need the stuff. So that study was interesting, and basically you publish that, and then the Daily Mail in the UK say, rugby player, you can drink whatever you want. It's not going to have any effect on you whatsoever.
Yeah, so how annoying would that have been for you to see, like, the media getting a hold of your research?
Because that's what they want.
I've seen this stuff everywhere. Like, it's been published in all the cycling magazines, and like they're citing your research.
Yep.
And like, oh, well, okay, I guess that's what it said. But how did you take that as your, you're seeing your stuff?
I mean, it's cool to get the recognition, I suppose. It gets your name out there, and you end up on your, sitting here talking to you guys.
You get on like the dopest endurance sports podcast.
Exactly. And I've done interviews for Outside Magazine and rock climbing magazines and cycling magazines and Runner's World and Men's Health, and they're all trying to apply what I've just talked about to their particular situation. And as I've said, it's very specific. If muscle is damaged, that's going to be the issue, right?
This is the problem with scientists. We're like, well, no, that's actually not what I did. Like, this is very specifically what I did.
Yep.
And you're standing by that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a certain situation where alcohol is going to have a detrimental effect. That rugby city, these guys played each other. As I say, they're used to being knocked around and stuff. Unless one of them got a really severe soft tissue injury for the alcohol to interact with, it's probably not going to have any effect. Well, it didn't have any effect, right? And then we did another study kind of with the same group of guys where we wanted to see whether not interacting with the game of alcohol, whether there'd be any different sort of effect. So they went out and they got really boozed similarly amount. And again, no effect. And that was, I guess that's not the interaction with the game or recovery. That's just the effects of a hangover. And they were equally able to perform. But again, it's context specific. They're heavy drinkers. But they're representative of student athletes for the most part. Not individual student athletes, but team sports student athletes in any country in the world. Students drink more than the general population, and student athletes drink more than that. So, yeah, there's this combination, right? So, not drink always, and this is the kind of pattern that you will see with most athletes. They abstain from alcohol during the week. They train hard and they'll drink after an event, say a game on a Saturday or a run or whatever, often as reward for the hard work that they've put in, or to celebrate or something like that. That's the general way. Often, unfortunately, we end up binge drinking, which is more than 6 standard drinks. And if we binge on a regular basis, then that increases our risk of alcohol-related harm from a health and a mental health side of things. Yeah. So those studies we published those, and you don't want to turn around and say, yep, drink as much as you want, because there's still all those negative effects on the rest of your body.
But in like the acute sense,
yep,
it was not detrimental.
Not detrimental. You know? So, context specific again. If you're used to something, you'll get away with it probably. Yeah. And the other studies that they've done, and that's just most of the studies that I've been involved with. The studies overseas have shown that there needs to be a really high dose of alcohol to have any effect. So they've done the effects of alcohol after exercise on protein synthesis. And we're talking sort of, those doses were like 20 standard drinks or something
Wow.
really, maybe not that high, but it was a massive amount of alcohol, quite unrealistic to actually see a suppression in protein synthesis after resistance type exercise.
I wonder how they got that through ethics.
And the other lab that's done a lot of research stuff, aside from us, they had a model where they would use slightly higher dose than we used, and they drink it in 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So hammering it back to get the alcohol in the system.
Yeah.
So, but that's not realistic. So they've looked at mainly hormonal responses. Does it suppress testosterone? Does it affect cortisol? My stuff has shown that it didn't have any effect, but that dose was a bit lighter probably. But they've shown that it may suppress testosterone. Certainly, we know that chronic, regular alcohol use does decrease your testosterone production. It'll shrink your testicles if you drink enough of the stuff over time. That decreases testosterone, increases estrogen in males, which leads to feminizing characteristics. You increase the amount of fat that you store around your belly. That's one of the big differences. In fact, people as a general will have a lower BMI if they're a regular alcohol consumer, particularly females, but males tend to store it. We know beer gut, right? Store it around there. That's one of the effects that it has on males. So that's a combination of kind of a change in the way your body stores because of the change in estrogen. Can lead to hair loss, breasts growing. Probably not characteristics that you want to develop as a young athlete if you're a male, right? So quite the opposite. And for females, it's going to disrupt, fertility and things like that as well. It plays havoc, just changes the way your hormones are balanced as a female, increases that estrogen, as I sort of alluded to before. So those are the kind of thing. If I'm trying to educate an athlete, and I'll tell them the truth, just like I am here, in a certain situation, it may not be that detrimental to you. But if every week you're drinking like that, over time, your testicles are going to disappear, and you're going to, and a decrease in testosterone obviously has effects on bone density, on muscle mass, fat tissue, and all that sort of stuff as well. So, and then it can affect the way you sleep as well. While some people think having a drink might help you nod off, it can disrupt normal sleep patterns, and that in turn can have an effect on the amount of growth hormone that's secreted at night, and may not necessarily allow you to recover as fully as you want. So lots of ways it can impair pretty much any system in your body, I guess. They've looked at testosterone. There's been a bit done on females. I guess you've probably got a couple of female listeners out there. What we've found, we did a study, and another lab did a study on the muscle damage stuff, and we found no effect of alcohol on females, even at quite a high dose. That may be due to estrogen protecting the muscle. They think that might be the case. Irrespective, it looked like, alcohol didn't interact with the muscle damage and probably doesn't have the same effect as we showed with males. However, that doesn't mean that women should go out and get absolutely slaughtered on booze or whatever after exercise, because there's lots of other issues at play. Those are kind of the main studies that have been done. The other stuff that when we think about recovery, muscle damage is just one small thing, and often if you've done exercise often enough, muscle damage isn't really a big deal unless you've done something really quite different. I guess if you're a mountain runner or something, maybe the track's steeper or something and you're not used to that, then you'll probably get some muscle damage. But as a general, if you're just used to running, you probably don't get a lot of muscle damage. Your body will adapt to that eccentric pounding that the muscles are going to take. But where was I going with that?
I guess this kind of leads to what does it actually mean for our listeners?
Sorry. I'll come back in there if that's all right.
Yeah.
Muscle damage is one thing. We've got glycogen resynthesis as well, right? So after a long run, you've depleted your glycogen levels. You need to replenish those, and wisdom or science says that you should do that quite soon after, particularly if you're going to train again the next day. So they've done some studies where they've depleted glycogen, and then the one study Louise Burke did, and others. They depleted glycogen, and then they did four different diets. And the only one, so they had a carbohydrate, they had a diet where alcohol displaced the calories from carbohydrate. And that was the only one that had any effect on the ability to resynthesize glycogen. So alcohol by itself, when there's carbohydrate available, doesn't have an effect on your ability to resynthesize or store glycogen. It's only, and often this is the case if we go out drinking and we start drinking and we don't necessarily eat, so we don't have that substrate to replenish the glycogen. That's the only case where alcohol is probably going to have an effect on your ability to store that glycogen.
But that really wouldn't be most things you're going to drink are going to either have sugar or
exactly.
carbohydrate and beer.
Well, it doesn't take much, does it, to start replenishing your glycogen?
No.
A sandwich or anything. And if you don't have to perform the next day, there's no massive hurry for that to happen, right? So it doesn't have to happen within the magic window of time or anything like that. If you're not going to perform the next day, same as hydration, there's no real hurry, because you don't have to perform. So it's probably fine to go out drinking and not remember to eat carbohydrate if you're not going to perform the next day. The other thing is hydration. Alcohol after exercise, because exercise may dehydrate you, alcohol doesn't make you more dehydrated. If you're already dehydrated, you can't get more dehydrated by drinking alcohol. So the body protects itself by kind of limiting the effects of that. So, if you're well hydrated, then alcohol will dehydrate you. It's diuretic. But if you're already dehydrated, like post-run or whatever, drinking is not going to make that worse. But I would say you should still focus on replenishing glycogen levels and rehydrating before you do anything. That's just good practice, irrespective of drinking or not drinking. Yeah. So those would be your main factors: repairing muscle, which it may inhibit; protein synthesis at high doses, it's going to have a detrimental effect; glycogen resynthesis, only if you don't supply the body with substrate; and hydration. If you're already dehydrated, probably not a problem. Yeah. And it's only at sort of a relatively high dose that alcohol is really going to have a really big diuretic effect.
Yeah.
That means just increasing urine production, I guess.
Yeah. One of the interesting, for me, with the kind of sports I'm involved in now with triathlon, running and stuff, people often take it too seriously. So there'll be a low-key event and maybe they've done really well and you go out afterwards and there's no one out. They might have a specific post-race party.
Yeah.
And it's I think from what you're saying, definitely, not condoning getting pissed, but it's fine to go out and have a few drinks if you want to.
Yeah.
You don't need to be super strict on it. Especially if it's the last race of the season or something like that. That's.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, drive home and crash drunk and die. But, as long as you're sensible, because there's all those other social, factors that drinking too much can do. But physically, I think absolutely drinking to moderation is fine for anybody, irrespective of whether they're an elite athlete or not.
Yeah.
That's what the science suggests, right? The best thing to base our recommendations for is the World Health Organization guidelines around drinking, irrespective of who you are, because everything we know and that we've just talked about still sort of falls under those, So you're not binge drinking. There's less than 6 drinks in a session. I think it used to be no more than 21 standard drinks for a male a week, or 14 for a female, with at least a day or two where you're not drinking any alcohol. You're only looking at a couple of drinks in a given session. That's moderate. Although that probably needs to be changed a little bit given the more recent research. But the belief was that if you drink like that, your chances of harm to your health, mental and physical, isn't going to be dreadful, right? So as long as our athletes abide by those rules, their health is going to be not too badly affected by alcohol, and their recovery is probably going to be fine as well. So I think that's the best, most common sense when people say, well, what do you reckon? Well, abstinence is unrealistic given our society, because everything revolves around alcohol for a lot of people. Deaths, births, Christmases, weddings, birthdays. There's usually alcohol there somewhere, drunk uncle sitting in the corner, being creepy. That's just
definitely at the births.
That's just society, and we can't expect our athletes not to be part of society. It's unrealistic. They're already placing lots of restrictions on themselves in terms of what they sacrifice for time commitments and other stuff they're doing. To not be able to be part of society, and you can be part of society. You can go to a pub and you can drink Coke or whatever. It's probably not that good for you either. But
it might be worse.
Yeah. But drinking at a moderate level is not going to be that bad for you. Yeah. So I don't think taking that hard line is not sensible, not realistic, and just isn't necessary. I've had people from magazines or TV shows or whatever contact me, and they'll say really specific questions. For our readers, if they're building up to a big event, what should they do around alcohol consumption? It's like, man, well, there's no research on that, so I can't really, So you base it off everything that and we've just covered all of the alcohol research around exercise in this conversation. But so where do you take that? You say, well, it's probably not going to be that bad. You could still probably have one drink, maybe even 2 drinks the night before you race.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that detrimental, particularly if you're used to it. If you're used to having a couple of drinks in an evening and then you go out and you train the next day and you perform perfectly fine, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change the way your heart beats or the way your body circulates blood or uses, because as I said, the alcohol, 2 drinks going to be out of your system in a couple of hours. You go to bed, you get plenty of sleep, you get up, you run at 10 o'clock. Alcohol's not going to have any effect on you whatsoever. Yeah. So I think that's the best approach, is just a common sense approach.
Sweet. I think that's probably a good place to finish, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time.
That's all good.
Matt.
It's cool.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no
Okay,
problem.
to you.
It's a long drive.
All right. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Whew, Matt. Wasn't that a good interview?
Yeah, that was cool. Thanks, Dr. Barnes, for coming on the show with us.
Have a good week, everybody.